All right, today we're going to continue working on our bat that we started last time. If you remember, before you open up Maya, you have your preferences that you want to always copy. Oops. So remember, you'll have that Maya folder sitting somewhere in your drive stuff. Oops. And then you will copy that Maya folder. You will go to the P drive, you will delete that Maya folder, and then paste yours in its place. Then you could open up Maya. And you can also open up Substance and Epic Games while we're on things. I believe that's where we left off.
How badly would it mess up UV mapping and textures if I added a, oh god, what was it?
I don't know.
A subdivision, the smoothing thing.
Nope, it wouldn't.
It wouldn't mess it up?
Nope, you just have to unfold it again and then lay out, and it'll be fine.
Oh, okay. So I feel like the spikes would look better if they were subdivided.
They could, but remember we have so many of them, and I mean, if you look at how blocky mine are,
yeah.
And this is what they look like in Substance, that blocky.
Subdivision surface, that's what it's called.
Right.
Okay.
Well, they call it smooth. In
Yeah.
the other one, they call it subdivision surface. So there's mine. So you can see, even if I'm up close to this, they still look pretty decent. It's only when I get pretty much right there, but I would never get that close because the texture looks like crap. I'd be, you know, back here.
Fine detail.
Right.
Okay. Substance painter, you need to get this goat out of my face.
All right, so also remember when we start Maya up, we never just open up our Maya scene. We always go down to the File, Set Project. We click on the project we're working on, so this is Sarcona Gaming Pipeline. And we say Set, and then we open up our file. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to do that. If you want to make the spikes smaller, where do they come from? The what? No, remember way on the bottom we had that piece? This isn't my bad anyway. Where's my bad at?
Is it still loading? Please just load up. Maya, please. Oh, that's the installer.
We have at the very bottom, we have that platonic solid. Well, it's at the bottom, we can't see it, but in our outliner you have that platonic solid. That's what we created it off of. So if we scale that up or down, that will control that spike size. So the good thing about having your preferences saved from class to class is that everything that you kind of set up before, it just carries over into the next one. So if I had my, like I had my UV editor open a second ago, there it is. This stays open. So Maya remembers, hey, last time you were here, you had the UV editor open. Last time you were here, the outliner was over there, and your channel box was over there. So make sure that from class to class, oh man, you're using those preferences. And I even have my symmetry on, which I'm going to turn off. All right, so this is where we left off last class. It's always a two-step, so always set it. Make sure you set it right to that main folder.
Yeah, no, I just got the open scene.
Yep, and then open.
I'm working with simple software.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, if you find you have a hard time keeping up with the lecture, then just take notes. Watch the lecture afterwards, finish it up, and then do your stuff that way, okay? I want to make sure we're progressing. So here's where we left off last class. We did the UV layout for the bat before, so that part is done. We did the UV layout for the grip, that's done. We did the UV layout for the wire, that's like crazy done. Now the last part of this is these little pieces, the little barb pieces. Now, because all of them are basically on top of each other, because they're all duplicates of the same item, that's what they look like. What I need to do is I need to be able to separate all of those pieces so I can lay out the UVs individually so that each one of those can get a separate texture. If I leave it the way it is now, when I go to paint the texture, it's going to actually bring in one texture that'll be duplicated on all those little pieces. Sometimes that's going to be fine, especially if you look at some of the reference for barbed wire. Okay, so if I look at the texture for just regular barbed wire, it's pretty much the same color all over the place. But if I look at something like this, there's definitely a nice texture on top of that where we see like little bits of rust and things, okay? So we just want to be aware that in this case, we want to have separate textures so that all of these little pieces of barb have separate things on them. Pull this up there, okay. So in order to do that, we have to get rid of our mesh stuff. Now if I just click that and delete it, all my barbs go away. So we don't want to just delete the mesh. What we need to do is click on that mesh repro. So if I just click on those barbs, and then I hit Control D, it'll duplicate the little pieces of barb off of there. Okay, so now this is a separate item, not connected at all to the mesh network. So then I can go to my mesh and delete it, and then go to, yeah, that was it, just delete the mesh. Yeah, the monster mash. Delete your monster mash. Okay, so the mash node is gone. That other item is gone. So now we basically have just geometry. So a lot of times inside Maya, you'll use these little tools like mash or instancing or something else to create the geometry, and then you'll just duplicate it and get rid of it. Just to give you another example, let's say that I wanted a plane. So this is just a for instance. I'm going to take this plane and just make sure it has squared divisions. Nope. Like that. And I'm going to make this a end cloth object. Now you don't need to do this. If you want to do this outside of class or if you have free time in class, then sure, but not during. Okay. So I made this an end cloth object. And what that means is that now when I hit, just stay down there. Now when I hit play every frame, max real time, that's fine. When I hit play, that's just going to drop down. But what I can do is grab the vertices here and then add a transform constraint. And now when I hit play, it'll do that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the bat, I'm going to make this a collision object so that now when it hits the bat, right? So what I can do is basically, I need more frames here. Oops. There we go. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to wait for it to look cool, like, let's say like that, okay? And then I'm going to duplicate it. And then I can delete all my N stuff that it created. And so now I just have this one sheet that I used NCloth to create the shape of it, but now I just have this as a separate object, okay? So that's something that you'll do kind of all the time inside Maya. Cool. So now we just need to take our UVs and get them to be in one square so that everything looks nice and neat. So I'm going to grab all my shapes. I don't need the curves. You can delete the curves. Those should serve no purpose at this point as long as you delete both at the same time. And the platonic solid, I don't need that. Okay, so you should be left with just your baseball bat, the helix, the extruded surface, and your mesh repro mesh 1. Okay. Now, you can always come back and add stuff to this too. So if you decide I want to add more of a grip, I want to add a nail sticking out of the bat, I want to add a whatever, you can definitely do that, okay? So we just have these 4 things, the bat, the helix, the extruded surface, and the mesh repro mesh. So now we're going to go to the UVs. Everything should look like a big mess, like this. And all we're going to do is just go to the shell, grab everything, and use that layout option box and set that up. Okay, so I'll do that again so you can see it. We have to go to Shell, grab all the pieces, hold Shift and right click, and go to Layout Option Box. Now I told you before, take a picture of this thing because it's always going to be the same. So we're always going to set this to 4096. We're always going to say preserve 3D ratios here under scaling. This is always going to be 4096, and then these will both be 5. Okay, so those are the 1, 2, 4, 5 things we always change. This, that, and then these 3. And then once you have that, hit apply or hit layout UVs, and it should lay out everything inside that square.
For shell padding, you got it set to 5?
Yes.
Is that also one of the things you always set it
Yep.
to?
So shell padding and tile padding. Shell padding is for this right here. There's a 5 pixel pad right there. And then the tile pad, sorry, this is tile padding. Shell padding is for this. There will always be 5 pixels between each piece. Okay. Cool. Good. The more stuff you have inside your scene, the longer it's going to take. So if we had 1,000,000 items, we hit that layout, it might take 5 minutes at the most to lay out all the UVs for it.
That's pretty cool how it does it for me.
Yes, it definitely is cool how it does it for us. Before, we would have to do this manually, and it would literally take forever to do that.
Myself while my mouse cord.
Yeah. So other things that we could do, just so you can see some of the other options. So there is rotate shell, and you can do rotations in 90 degrees. So basically what the layout does is we have all these pieces, just like you're going on a trip and you have to pack your suitcase. You have all these pieces that need to fit inside the suitcase. Okay. If I had an item that's this wide and my suitcase is taller, it makes more sense to rotate that item to fit it in there, right? So that's what that rotate shell is going to do, is it'll rotate the pieces so that they can fit better inside the areas. So right now it's set to 90, and it's going to rotate them starting at 0 and go to 360. So the more stuff that we have set up here, the longer that's going to take, because it's going to do one iteration and then do it again. How does it look here? Then do it again. How does it look here? Then do it again. How does it look there? So as long as it took us to do it one time, it'll take us that much longer to do it. So typically, like 90 degrees is fine there, and then let's say 22.5 is fine there. So you don't need to do this. I'm just doing this so you can see it. But what it's going to do is it's going to just try to repack those items so that they fit a little bit nicer inside that area. Because our biggest thing here that we're trying to do is maximize this square. If everything that we laid out is in a small little chunk in the bottom of that square and the rest of it is not being used, then we're wasting our texture. We want to have those pieces as big as possible and have this square as filled up as possible so that our textures are as detailed as possible. The reason, if I zoom in on here, the reason that this chain looks so horrible is because those chain pieces are only like that big inside the UV, and they're only picking up, let's say, 3 pixels or 6 pixels. I mean, you can pretty much see how many pixels that they have there, right? It's very little detail right there because of how tiny those are. Later on, when we're doing stuff like, for movies or videos, we don't really care too much. I mean, we do, but not as much as a game, how many pixels we have there. We can actually expand that further. This is still thinking. This square is just the start of that. For games, we leave it right there. But for other stuff, we can actually go outside of that and have basically a 4K texture for the bat, a 4K texture for the grip, a 4K texture for the wire, a 4K texture, if we wanted to, for each one of those things, and we'd be able to fit a whole bunch of resolution into each one of those. Now that will mean longer render times, bigger files. Obviously our folder will get enormous. All right, so let's see if this is almost done. Boom, there it goes. So with these settings, it looks like it packed it pretty much the same thing that it did before, so not a huge difference. Okay, so I can close the window there, And now we're going to go and take this out of here and bring this into Substance. Yours is still thinking, that's fine. We'll just move along. So we're going to export the selection out. Anytime you're unsure, it's either going to be, for this class at least, an FBX or an OBJ, okay? So FBX or OBJ is how you export the stuff out. So I'm going to call this NeganBat. I want to say Megan, I don't know why.
Me too. Me too. I said Negan for quite some time too before.
Yeah. I watch Key and Peele too much, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to call this one NeganBat low-res 002 as an OBJ, okay? Now, if you're unsure of that, all you have to do is, if I know that I'm going into Substance, when I go into Substance and I go to the new item and I say Select, down here at the bottom, it'll show you all the different file formats that it accepts. So you can see, is FBX in here? I know OBJ is because it's the second thing. Some of these will even accept Maya. Let me keep going over. Yeah, I don't see FBX in here. There's a chance it's off screen that it might accept it. We don't need to worry about it because I exported an OBJ.
Just correction, we hit export selection or export?
Well, we made sure, well, it depends, right? So if I grab everything, I do export selection. It's the same thing as me just going to export all, because that's the only things in my scene.
Okay, because I don't want to export the plane or whatever it is in the bottom.
Right, if you have a plane or something, yeah, you just want those 4 items, the bat, the grip, the wire, and then the other stuff. Okay. So I'm going to go to Substance, and we're going to make a new item. Okay, so under the template, we choose Unreal Engine 4. Okay, always choose what we're going to. In this case, we're going to Unreal, so we choose Unreal Engine 4. Eventually, we'll be doing stuff back into Maya, and we'll be choosing the PBR ones. But for now, just Unreal Engine. Then we select our mesh. And then everything else should be good. All right. So just so you can see that process again, because this is going to be over and over and over again. We take our mesh. We've laid out the UVs on every single one of our items. We've unfolded it. We've verified that each one of those pieces, if we were to show the texture squares like this, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger just because our pieces are so small. Whoops. Come on. Oh my goodness. Now you can see that we have squares all over. Now some of these little pieces on this, it's a little bit distorted, but it's not going to be a huge deal because we don't really see it that much. So we have squares all over this entire thing. Every single piece has been laid out. And we need them to be square so that our texture is square, so they won't get like stretched out. So if I put a circle on there, it's a circle, it's not an oval or even like a line. So once each piece is laid out or unfolded, then we can grab all the shells and then do a layout. And then a layout is just simply a matter of packing it in. You can do, sometimes I will do, click off that. Sometimes I'll take pieces like this and then I'll unfold them. Okay, so like these are unfolded. And then I'll go and lay it out just to see how it's going to lay out inside my scene, or lay out inside here. Sometimes I'll rotate them just so that Maya knows, like, okay, I want these to be vertically facing, right? Just so I know that when it packs it, that's how it's going to pack it, is vertical, not at that weird angle, because when it does that, it can screw up the rest of it, okay? And then once it's laid out, we grab everything and export it, okay? So those processes of modeling, unfolding, laying out the UVs, exporting it out, that process will be the same for every single one of our assignments.
Now, what's the difference between FBX and OBJ?
It's just a matter of what they can export. So an OBJ is simply an object, okay? So I have no animation on this. I'm not bringing any cameras in. It's strictly just like here is a flat 3D object. you can put materials on it, but the materials don't transfer the same way that they would in other ones.
So FBX would just, in case you were adding.
Right. So when we go into something like Nuke, we have an FBX because that way Nuke will read the animation on the cameras, it'll read the animation on the objects, and it actually brings in the entire object. Sweet. All right, so then we come in here, we went to File New. I'll just discard that. We chose Unreal Engine. We picked our mesh. And that's it. Something to pay attention to for now is this document resolution. It's at 2048. That means that whatever texture we create is at 2048. Now, this is in Substance, you can change that number at any time, which is awesome. So if I were to draw a circle at 128, I could export that out with a circle at 4096, and as long as I drew it the correct way in Substance, it'll export out at the right resolution. It'll export out nice and smooth. Okay, so 2048, keep it up there for speed, and we should be good. All right, so now what we have to do is tell Substance, or let Substance figure out, what does this surface look like, okay? So it knows like this is a piece of 3D geometry, but it doesn't know like where it's bumpy, it doesn't know where the curves are, it doesn't know where the folds are, or where there's like some close objects. So on the texture set settings, go to Bake Texture, and under Bake Texture, you'll see that this has a little, warning sign here, and there, and there, okay? So each one of these is basically saying that there's something wrong. This isn't going to work. These warning signs mean that you need to have some sort of high polygon geometry going along with it. Okay, so I need to have a high poly surface in order for this to work. In this case, we just have a low poly surface, which is fine. I'm going to just say use low poly as high poly. And what that means is, hey, Substance, just pretend that the low polygon is the high poly and generate all your maps off of that. If I created a box, and just as simple as it gets, I created a cube, and that's my low resolution, and then I create a crate, and that's my high resolution, it'll actually use the crate's information, like where is there a crack in the crate, where is there a seam, where is there a bevel, and it'll actually make the small resolution cube look like the high resolution cube, okay? In this case, we're not doing that, so we just click that box. There is an output size here, okay? So this is actually going to create textures for each one of these items, okay? So for normal, world space, ID, ambient, curvature, position, and thickness, it's going to make a 2048 pixel image for that. Set it to 1024, and then hit bake. And now the reason we're setting it to 1024 is because we want to see as quick as possible if what we've typed in or what we've set up is correct. If we look at our maps and we get some weird stuff, we want to fix that as quickly as possible, okay? So if I went to a 4096, it would take 4 times as long, 5 times as long, 10 times as long, who knows? So now that this has been created, if I hit, B, there it is. If I hit B, I can cycle through the different maps. So this is normal. This is world space normal. There's not much that we need to really worry about with those. There's the ID. Most likely it's going to look like that or just a solid color. And this is one that we're going to be concerned about. So ambient occlusion. So if you hit B, you'll get to one that says ambient occlusion right here. And now we can see basically white and black. That's what we should be seeing. The ambient occlusion is basically you have, where are my props at? You have an item here, and you have another item there. Ambient occlusion will be white over this entire thing, except for where there's pretty much contact right with that paper, okay? And then there will be some gradation that kind of falls outside of that realm. On the pen itself, there will be some ambient occlusion up here and some ambient occlusion down there. Which step did you miss, Austin?
Oh no, I was trying to wonder how to get the bat into Substance, and then apparently it was there, just the window wasn't showing anything.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, why is it not showing anything? Apparently it was there the whole time. So, yeah, no, I don't know. I'm still learning how
Yeah.
There's like 4 of them.
Yeah, this class especially. Okay, so.
I was like, oh, I was panicking. I was like, I can't interrupt.
No, you're good. So there's what our ambient occlusion looks like. That's what it should look like, okay? I'm gonna hit B again. There's the curvature. This one's gonna be a little bit harder to tell what it looks like. But basically, as our surface is curving, we should see more of a change in the pattern. That's what we're looking for. Is there a change in the texture as we're moving along? Holy cow. So you can see right there, there's some white. This is gray, this is white, this is gray. So that's definitely working. There's some black down there for some reason.
And that showed up after you baked it?
Yep, after we baked it. Okay. Position is going to look like that. That one shouldn't be anything crazy. And then thickness will look like this. Okay. And thickness is one that's going to basically measure like how thick is the actual surface. Thinner areas you'll see are black. So the grip and the wire are black because they're like super thin. But the bat itself is like really white here and then kind of gray and then kind of gray. All right. So I'm going to hit M to get back to that. So now that I know that all my maps are good, and for this first one they should be pretty good, I'm going to go to Bake Texture again and then crank it up to 4096. And then say Bake again. If there was a problem with it, let's say my ambient occlusion didn't work, or curvature didn't work, or whatever, I can go in there and bake out just that one and diagnose, just change some of my settings until I'm happy with the results, and then come back and bake everything at that high res, okay? As you get more complex, that goes up and up and up. So I guess I really don't need that open right now. Substance influence and all that. So something like this guy here, he's got so many different surfaces that are on top of him. In order for this to create all those maps and look as good as it does, there's a lot of tweaking that would go into those settings. It's not just like bake and then it's good. Typically the defaults are good, but sometimes you have to adjust them. So for something like this, that's going to take maybe 10, 20 minutes for it to bake out. Okay, same thing there. The more pieces you have, the more difficult it is for that to do what it needs to do. Oh, that's awesome. Back to substance. You see my substance is still actually writing it out. Yeah.
So we're doing this at a 40...
4096. Okay. Now we could go 8000, 8192, but it's too much for what we're doing. Okay.
What about these triangles with exclamation points on them?
Did you click use low polygon? In your options here, use low poly mesh as high poly, and they'll still be there, but you won't have to worry about them.
But, so click it?
Yeah, make sure that's clicked.
Yeah, it was clicked. I was
Yep.
just wondering, there's like 340.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. The only time these things are gonna go away is when we actually import one of those inside. All right. To really explore. Yeah, we will. Okay, so now if you look at your maps, you don't have to look at yours, you can just look at mine. You'll see that the maps are a lot more detailed. There's still grain inside here, and that again is from, number one, my settings. If I go into that Bake Texture Ambient Occlusion, come on, oh. There are these secondary rays. I could crank that up, and that will help kind of smooth out some of that texture. If I wanted this blackness to kind of extend further, I could take this occluder distance and start spreading that out even further too, okay? So all of these settings we'll kind of get into and start playing with, but for now, that's going to be good enough, okay? Hit M again, cool. All right, so now before what we did with the bat is we just dragged the material, boom, and dropped it on the bat, and it was wood, right? That's what we did. So we're going to still go into the smart materials, especially for now because we're still learning the tools. And we'll find one of these wood materials. So there's 3 of them. You can use wood, beech veined, chest, or walnut. Doesn't matter which one you pick. Just drag that onto the layer 1.
Oh, where'd my layers go?
Oh, I don't like that at all. I'm going to grab this layer 1. There we go.
My layers are all done.
Okay, So this is basically vector texture painting is what this is. So this item right here is, they call it procedural, meaning that instead of painting on here, there's actual settings that go into making this thing look like it's looking, okay? At the very core of it, there is a texture, but for right now, just trust me on that. All right, so now we're going to open up the wood, and depending on which one you got, you're going to have different settings. It's no big deal because they're pretty much all the same. So if you open up that little folder, you should have a swatch with a little paint bucket on it, right? Okay. And then you have basically a mask. So this is exactly like Photoshop. This is the color. So this is basically just like a fill layer. And then this is a mask of what that is going to look like, okay? Now under the mask is this. So you may not have this specific one, but clicking down further in your list, I'm sure you'll find one. If I click on the fill that's not there, click on the mask, it is there. This is how it's creating this mask, okay? So the mask is being created off of this grunge map. And over here, there's a grunge map, and there's a balance and contrast. And you can play with any one of these settings. So I can pull the contrast up, and you can see how I can adjust the dirtiness of that wood. Oh, it's disgusting. Okay, so just by adjusting some of these sliders, you can really control what this wood is going to look like. Now this one is the dirt layer, so what do you think that's going to be affecting? The dirt, right. So that's the dirt. So if I'm going to affect the wood veins, I would go down to the wood veins area. And then if I scroll down, to levels, there's nothing really here to play with. If I go to this, again, there is the amount of wood veins. There's the thickness of the wood veins. There's the length of the wood veins. What I really want to do is I want to rotate this. All the wood is going left and right. I want it to go up and down because that would be the strongest way for the bat to be made. So all of these that I click on, from the very top one here, I want to change our projection type to triplanar. Okay, so anything I click on here, I look for that word triplanar. Nope. Click on this. Oops. There it is. Make sure that says triplanar. Click on these. There it is, triplanar. And so I'm just going through every single button that's here. And anywhere it says UV projection, I'm changing it to triplanar. And what should happen eventually, by the time you get to the very bottom, is that it should lay out like a piece of wood.
And that's on all your textures that you do?
Yep, every single one of those things. Triplanar. Okay, so UV projection is basing it off of the UV map. So inside here, if I grab just the bat, this piece is going this way, this piece is going on an angle, this piece is going that way, this piece is going around. It's basically just like taking that picture and dropping it right on there. That isn't going to make it blend nicely. Doing a triplanar, it reprojects it inside here, all of these directions. Okay, now it's doing that kind of like on the fly, and then converting that into a texture piece, okay? So now, so now I have the wood grain going along the bat. It's not doing it? All right, so not too difficult. Now if you wanted to change the color of it, I don't like the color of this wood, I want to change whatever it is. At any point, any of these fill layers, you can click on the fill layer, come over here to the color, and make it whatever color you want. So I just made the wood fibers orange, and you can definitely see that the wood fibers are orange. If this is Negan's bat, then this would probably be like a dark red, right? Maybe. All right, so now what's the problem with the wood or the wood texture on here? It's all the same, right? So the metal looks the same, the other stuff looks the same. We need to obviously fix that. So just like Photoshop, we can create masks for groups. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to drop another smart material on here, and I'm going to create a mask that says only these items will get that specific texture. So for, let's say the grip, we'll do the grip next. For the grip, I'm going to use a rubber material here. I think I used rubber dry before, or rubber tire. This other rubber tire dirty, that one I don't think looked good. But maybe it was this rubber tire. So I'm going to drag rubber tire not onto the wood. I'm either going to drag it into the blank area or drag it on top of layer 1. Okay? And then what that does is it overwrites it. Okay? Just like Photoshop, whatever's on top, that's what we're seeing. Whatever's on the bottom, it's covered up by whatever's on top. So now we have to create a mask that says, rubber tire, I only want you to be on this specific item. Okay? So in here, you'll see there's a mask button right here. Okay, so I make sure I'm clicked on rubber tire. At the very top of the layer area, it says configure mask. And I click on this mask, and then I'm going to go to add a black mask. Okay, so if I add a black mask in Photoshop, what does that do?
Hides everything.
Hides everything, right? So basically we've hidden that entire layer. Now I want to reveal just the grip. So over here, and they need better icons, they seriously do. This is called Polygon Fill. It allows us to click on an item and fill that polygon with a specific color. So the grip is all one piece, so I can click on the grip with a white brush with this tool, and it'll fill it on that mask with white, therefore revealing it just on that layer. That's why Photoshop is so important, right? So I'm going to click on that. This over here, I don't know why they have that, but whatever. You can't tell what you're on. Just make sure you click and drag all the way to the right. Okay? That way we know we're actually filling with white versus black. Because you see it's very difficult to see where the little cursor is because it just looks like it's the end of the box. It doesn't look like it's actually white. Okay? Also, these three icons here. So one of these is triangle fill, meaning, remember we talked about quads, and when we have a quad item, a four-sided item, it renders stuff out, it creates a triangle, and that's what renders out. So that's what this is going to do, is that if I click on this, I can fill in each one of these faces. Does anyone want to do that? No? Good. The next one is Polygon Fill. That's the one that we probably want. Nope, that's still the wrong one. The last one is the best one, Mesh Fill. Boom. Okay? So if we click on that Mesh Fill one, all we have to do is click on that grip, and it'll fill that entire mesh with that white mask, allowing us to color just the grip to be that black color. The cube. Yep. Okay. And then I'm going to do the last one, which is the wire at the top. I'm going to drag in this case I'm going to drag Steel Scratched to layer 1, drop a black mask on it, and then because I'm still in that tool and I'm still filling it with white, I just have to click on it.
What would you use to grab it again?
What'd you say? What do you use to grab it again?
Yeah, to grab the different polygons.
The Polygon Fill tool right here, and then that. Now here's what we're going to notice about this, is that even though these are all part of the same object, it still wants us to click all of these around here, and that's way too much work for me to do. So does anyone have any better ideas? Throw out some suggestions, anything. I can do a couple things. One, I can do this. I grab the whole thing, and now the whole thing is that, right? So I just marqueed all of those, and it fills that entire area with what I just selected with that same color. Then I can change my color to black, and then just fill the bat in. Okay? So basically I've done the opposite. Instead of filling it with white, I filled it with black. And so now, if I go back to this, that is way too bright, but it works. Okay, so there's a million ways to do this. The other thing I could have done is I could have kept the steel scratched at the bottom of this and left the wood on the top of it. Okay, that way I could have just picked the wood and put a mask on it. So if I brought this one up to the top, put a black mask on it, filled the black mask with white for the bat, that gives me the same exact results. Sweet. Under here, yep. Yeah, all of that ambient occlusion stuff, that's where those shadows are coming from. So it actually like does like a really awesome job with, you know, how that, I mean, just, it already looks amazing. I should make you guys go into Mari and hand paint a texture so you can see how horrible that used to be. Now it's still going through some spots. I could move those around inside Maya, but it's good enough for now. All right, so what's the last thing we need to add to the bat? Yep, the O.
Oh, the O, okay. I thought you meant like we need to add like blood stains to the bat. I was like, okay.
No, blood stains to the bat. We could. We don't need to. Just for fun, this is one of the awesome things about Substance, is they have these particle brushes. And so if I go to, let's say, that one, that will work. So this particle brush is basically a dynamics type thing. So if I just click on here, I don't even know what color or what settings I have. The white, I'll just make this red so we can really see it. So if I make this red and I just click, it'll actually like go around the surface to create that kind of shape, which is like, it's like super awesome. I could do stuff like this too, like rain. Like if I just clicked on this, it simulates rain, so rain would most likely be on the top of the item, not the bottom of the item. And so it'll actually like streak down the sides of it. And then the more I click and drag, the more rain that happens. You can see the little rain drops.
So what's making it follow like
The contours, just the shape of that. So it's actually following, like going along that whole shape. So it's kind of like dynamics is a bit mixed into that too. And then if you look at the very bottom of this, under particle, I clicked on the brush and then over here on the right. So there's none or very little rain right there at the bottom. Okay, so I don't want that, so I'm just going to delete that layer. All right, so now we need to add the O to this. And if you look at it, the O, in this case, is actually like ingrained in this. We're just going to keep it as a separate piece just to keep it a little bit simpler. So make a new layer over here. So this is the new layer button. Okay, so right there's new layer button. And what I want to do is I want to fill, or I want to create this O. Unless you are fantastic at drawing with the mouse or whatever, and you want to be able to just go like this and draw it yourself, very difficult to do. Okay. So we're going to use a template. Let me see. All right, so first things first. So go to your brush and pick default hard. Then in the far right is where the brushes are. So over here, this is the size of your brush, this is the flow, this is the stroke opacity, the spacing, and so on. Scrolling down further, you'll see that, further down, there's a material, and the material has color, height, roughness, metal, and normal. So what happens is, and one of the great things about this software is that when I paint on here, so I'm just going to paint like this, you'll see that even though I've painted red, that some of that wood texture is still coming through, okay? There it is. Yeah, so what happens is, it's not only just painting the color, but it's also painting the bump or the height of this item, and it's also painting the roughness. So if I choose a color that's like really dark, and I choose a roughness that is none, and I choose a metallic that is all the way up, and I paint, I lied, I paint this as white. There we go. We're actually painting like a reflection on here, okay? Because it allows us to paint all of these maps all at once, which is like super duper awesome. Not just super awesome, super duper awesome. If I take the height down, it'll actually like push it in. So you can actually see like in the bat, it looks like there's like a little cutout in it. There's no cutout, it's just I've pushed it in a little bit with the bump, so it's like a fake push in. Okay? So now let's go through what each of these is going to do. So base color is simply the color of the item. So what color would this be? Black, right? So let's go here, let's make it black. You can make it a little bit reddish, orangish if you want to. There we go, perfect. Height is going to be how much it's going to push in or pull out, or the other way around. So if I go to right where it's black in the center, this is 0. So it's basically just like no movement at all. If I go far right, it's going to pull out. It's hard to see because I have that roughness. Let me just adjust this and adjust that. There you go. So that's it with it at 1. This is with it at -1. So that's going to look like it pushes in. Okay, so with this type of thing, this looks like it's pretty flush with the surface. If someone drew it on with a marker, it wouldn't be bumped out. But if someone like wood burned it, it would be pushed in, right? That makes sense? Okay. So I'm going to leave this at 0. You can double click. Where do I? Oh, I can click on the pen on the far right and hit 0, and it'll go right to 0. Whoops. You could also come up to the top where it says material, and I could just uncheck height. And that means it won't paint any height information. That way, in case I accidentally was painting, let's say I painted at 1, it's going to overwrite whatever is underneath it, so the wood would actually look different. Let's look at roughness. It looks like it's pretty rough. It's not super reflective. I mean, we have a sharp reflection there, but it's not like crazy. So we're going to go with something, let's say, about 0.3-ish, okay? So something like that looks pretty decent. Yeah, that's good. Roughness is how sharp our reflections are. So if I paint this like that, you can see the reflections are pretty sharp in there. If I take the roughness all the way up in paint, the reflections are pretty glossy. I mean, I went too much there. You can't see it. There you go. So now we can really see the reflections kind of like spread out a little bit more on there. So I'm going to go with about 0.3. And then metallic is how much of the item is actually like reflective. So if I pull that all the way up, this is going to be a super reflective item. If I pull it all the way down, there's no reflection on that. Okay, there's some specularity to it, but not that. All right, so I'm going to go with maybe the 0.3 in there too, just because the bat does have some. No, I think that's too much. All right, put your roughness to about 0.4 and a little bit, and your metallic to 0.7 and a little bit.
Set the height to 0, I think.
The height I just turned off. You can turn it off right there.
Oh, wait, where? Oh.
Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to be able to draw that oval shape, okay? So if I click here, that gives me a circle, so that's not really what I want. I'm going to go up to, I believe I went to stencil. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. So if you click on the word stencil, this brings up basically a bunch of different things that you can adjust. So let's see if this is how I did it before. Stencil, seed, flip, hardness, maybe not. Oh, that's how I did it. Sorry, don't use stencil. Just click the X on stencil and go up to alpha and then type in circle. And then inside here, you should see one that says shape circle squeeze.
Hit the X on alpha or click on alpha?
No, click on alpha. Because that'll let you go through and pick from a bunch of different items.
Okay.
The alphas are basically like textures. Like if I had a spaceship and I wanted it to have like this little pattern down here on that, I can use the alpha just to like stamp that pattern all over the place instead of having to draw it out in Photoshop or whatever. So you're going to get shape circle squeeze. And the reason that we're using this is because we can control the squeeziness of it. And if I scroll up a bit, I can rotate it 90 degrees. So you'll see how I can adjust the squeeze and then adjust the size. If you remember what the hotkey is in Photoshop for resizing your brush, you can use that here too. Does anyone know? Brackets, yep. So just use your brackets. There's your sizing.
How did you rotate that?
Scroll up, and there's an angle right here. You just type in 90. Yeah, the settings for Substance are crazy because there's like so many different spots to change stuff in and tweak. Yeah, it just takes some time to get used to where things are at. I mean, even like the stencil, you know, sometimes I'll use stencil, sometimes the alpha, but this works. Okay.
Oh, thank God brackets still choose the size.
So we're going to do 2 steps here. So one, I'm just going to click this, find a good spot and click it. And then I'm going to shrink my brush down and then change it to the eraser. Oops. And then also pick that same shape.
Where's the eraser?
Next to the brush up here.
Oh. Where?
Right there.
Oh. I keep looking in like different spots.
And now I'm just trying to match up the squeeziness of each one. There we go. So that's pretty close. And then you just erase the center out of it.
When it's on a new layer, you can move it beneath the metal.
Yep. So yeah, so it's on its own layer, so I can just move it below it, and now it's under the metal instead of being on top of it. Okay, now remember the whole time we're doing this, as we're painting stuff and adding textures and doing whatever here, Substance is also writing out texture files for us. So if I click on F3, there's our textures, right? So it would take us forever to actually have to hand paint this inside Photoshop. But there's that circle too. So if we decided, hey, I don't like the color of that circle, I can still go into Photoshop if I needed to and tweak it if I didn't have my Substance file. Here's all the pieces for that metal. Let me get rid of that. Oh my gosh. So all those little pieces, that's them right there. So I'm going to hit F2 to get back to that. Sweet. All right, so now we need to export this out, so we should probably save first, so Control S.
That gets saved under.
I put it inside of my source images. You can put it anywhere inside that folder is typically a good place for it. Source images, images, or scenes. Just be aware that that file, because of all the textures, it writes out all of these, so 1, 2, however many that's there, and it's going to write out the texture that it's creating for this. All of those are saved somewhere. Sweet. So that file, if I go to my folder P drive here, loud. It should only take a few minutes at the most.
Okay, because I hit the same button and it just didn't do anything.
Yeah, so mine's half a gig. Okay, so these files will get pretty big just for these substance ones. Okay, so once it's saved, then we're going to export it out. So we go to File, Export Textures. And this is where we want to specify that this is going to be a 4096 texture. So right here under the texture sets, it says 2048. We want to set it to 4096. Yep. Okay, so we're exporting this as a 4096. We'll save this as a JPEG. And we'll put this inside of our source images folder.
So we just hit export textures, right?
Yep. TIFFs are big files. So if we were going to render this out inside Maya, we would save it as a TIFF. Because we're going to be going into Unreal with it, we want the smallest file possible, which is going to be a JPEG. Okay. Now, typically, you're correct. We wouldn't save it as a TIFF or as a JPEG for higher quality stuff, but JPEGs are small. Just so you can see the difference. I don't have any right here, do I? Source images. I do. So these images here are 23 megabytes, and these are pings. That's what we saved last time. So watch how small these ones are when we export them out. So we would need to save this as an Unreal Engine. Okay, so there's our config, Unreal Engine packed. JPEG. Everything else should be good. Then we hit export. Okay, so now this should export out a 4096 by 4096 texture for the color, the roughness, the metallic, the ambient occlusion, the normal map. Forgetting one. I can't remember which one it is. But it'll only export actually 3 files out. But it packs all the information into those 3 files. All right, so here we go. Get that low. Yep, that's it. Okay.
I accidentally exported this as a PNG first.
Yeah, just go back and change it to JPEG.
Delete all these old PNGs, or?
So here's the ones we did last time with just the bat. It's 23 megabytes for one file. Here's the JPEG, 2 megabytes or 3 megabytes. Okay, so it's a huge size difference when you save something as a JPEG. Now the quality of this versus the quality of this one, I guess photos. All right, I'm going to be able to get close on either one of these, and it's still going to look about the same, okay? Now there will be, because obviously we've lost some data, there will be some artifacting. So if you look at these, you can kind of see some different colorations around these edges right here. And that's just some odd artifacting that happens because we're saving this as a JPEG. So we do lose some quality, but for the most part, for what we're doing with this, we shouldn't really notice anything huge. Okay, so now we can go to Unreal. And if you have your, if you remember where you saved your Unreal stuff, you can actually just double click it. Yes, I know. So I know that for my Unreal, I put it inside my modeling, or my gaming pipeline game trial. I can just double click that trial project and that will pop it up into that area. It'll actually open it up instead of me having to open up Epic Games and then clicking the wrong button. Close that. Close that. Yes. So many windows open. Holy cow. And game trial, that's what we called it.
What is this under?
Mine's under my 2520 gaming pipeline. Yeah, it's definitely quicker just to double click that, but just so you can see. All right, there's bat number 1. So once I get into Unreal, it's just a matter of importing everything. So import, find my images. So I grab my 3 JPEGs. Now I'm purposefully not organizing anything here because I want you to see just how cluttered this is going to be. So when we do our later stuff, we will stay more organized. This is imported as a normal map. I hit OK. And then I'm going to import my model. So I import the OBJ, and I imported my textures. Yes, yes, yes. And for some reason, it broke my stuff into pieces. Let's see. Yep, it didn't like that. No, the bat's in here. Oh. Didn't like the other thing. But does this have the grip? All right. Oh, it didn't. It broke everything into pieces. Look at that. Yep. Wow. All right, I'm going to delete those things I just imported and jump back into Maya and export this out as an FBX. And then let's try that one more time. Nope, it still broke them in. I thought they fixed that. All right, let me try one more time with this one. A lot of this depends on the settings, and at one point, yep, see, I'm in the wrong version of that. So loud. Still bringing them in. All right, we're going to jump back to Maya, and we're just going to combine everything. Okay, so I'm going to grab all my pieces, hit Mesh, and then say Combine. And then, yep. So I combined everything into one piece, so there shouldn't be an issue there.
Where'd you hit Mesh at?
Under Mesh, and then Combine. Yep, just make sure you grab everything first.
Oh, you have to go to modeling. Oh.
That's why.
Why was that even?
Oh. And then we'll delete the history, and then we'll export that again. Now this doesn't matter, FBX or OBJ, it'll take it.
Then re-export this too?
Yep, then re-export it, and then just bring it back in. And then it will accept it as the one piece. All right, so now we just need to take, there we go, make a material off of these things. So if I go to, if I right click and make a new material, I'm going to call this one M_NeganBat. And then just double click it. Okay, so you right click, make a new material. And the nice thing is from Cinema, that's what we had down here before, is we had all those materials. So you could just right click and then create your material. So same thing here. And then this is the way that we're doing this, where we're connecting things. When we get into Maya and we're doing production stuff, that's how we're going to be doing it. Is a lot of it is going to be just how things are connected. Okay. So I'm going to take all three of my materials and just drag them into all three of my textures and just drag them into that bat window. So now that they're in there, now I can go to that to connect them all. All right, so this is my color. I can tell that because of what it looks like here. If I hover my mouse over it, it says base color. So I drag this to base color. And then you'll get your preview so you can see what it looks like. Nothing fancy. This is my normal map. I drag this to normal. And then I should see a little bit of bump on here. Not crazy amount, but a little bit anyway. Yep. And then this one is 3 maps built into one. So that's why it looks so funny, because it's actually the occlusion, the roughness, and the metallic. Okay, in that order. So the red is the occlusion. Green is the roughness. And then the blue is the metallic. So now we should get something that looks similar, not exact, but similar to what we saw in inside Substance. So I'm going to save this, close it, and then on the NeganBat, I'm going to double click it and then just assign Negan. I guess I can just type Negan in there.
How'd you get into the texture line thing?
This one here, you just double click on it. All right, so now I can just change that material there, and now I have that bat. Sweet. Now again, it's not going to look exactly like the Substance one. Don't try to get it to look exactly like that. If I have good lighting in this scene and I have bad lighting in my other scene, then those two things are never going to be the same. So you always have to realize that they're not going to be exact. Yep, so there's the circle. It's upside down, but I can fix that, no problem. So we'll save this, I'll close it. And then I can just drop the bat inside the scene and then use the R key to scale it up, to rotate. There we go, that's a big one. And then hit the play button, and then I can walk around it. He could pick it up. That could be something that I set up for him to do, but that's not today. Yeah, we can do animations too. So you see that little coin moving? So we can do stuff like that where we would have the bat like spinning around. If you got really into it, you could have him, you know, like just like a video game. He walks over and hits the button and it picks it up, and then you can use it to hit stuff. Well, all the stuff, and this is what's neat about Unreal versus other ones, is they're all based off of these blueprints. So if I go to here and I'm just test blueprint, all the stuff is based off of creating stuff inside this area. So if I go to static mesh, bat. Okay, so this is going to be the bat. I'm going to make another one called scene. Oops. There we go. I'm going to bring my bat in.
So just to be sure, the texture sample goes under base color, and the blue thing goes under normal?
Yep.
And then the other thing is ambient occlusion.
Roughness and metallic.
Yep.
Collision box. All right, so with this bat, I'm making a little collision box.
So if that ball looks funny, that's okay?
That's fine, yep. It should come together in the other thing. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to say, oops. I'm going to right-click and say on component overlap. Begin overlap. There we go. And then what do I want to happen? So in this case, let's say that I want the bat to disappear. So I'm going to say toggle visibility of the bat. Done. So now I hit play, and when my, oops, I didn't drop it in the scene. Let me drop this in the scene. There it goes. Okay, so see that box right there. When my guy walks in that box, the bat should just disappear. Should disappear. We'll find out. There it goes. And then he walks in it again. There it is. Okay, so there's no actual programming that I needed to do in order for that to work. I just have to understand how those nodes kind of flow together. And like Unreal is awesome for that because you don't need to know a whole bunch of programming to do it. Now the sucky thing is that some of these can get crazy complex when you really start looking at getting things to work the way that you want them to work. So something like that, just like Nuke, right? Something like that, something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry for asking, but how did you get the bat
Back in here,
yeah, oh.
did you export it? You combined it all, right?
Yeah.
Yep, and then just importing it?
Yeah, no, I just I'd make it appear on screen.
Oh, on screen. You just drag it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, because now it's just an asset.
Because I still have like 4 different
4 different other bats.
Yeah, I have the bat, and then I have the then I have the parts to it.
Yeah. So see, I can make like the bats disappear, and then toot toot, like I'm collecting them, right? And I can have coins and whatever else.
So okay.
Sweet.
So I swear to God, I did the whole mesh combine thing, and it didn't.
No, we'll look at it.
Yeah.
All right. So once you get to this point, that's it. That's all we're doing for this first assignment is just being able to go from. Let me save all my stuff here. Where's Maya? There you are. Being able to model something pretty simple that's not crazy complex. You know, I think the most we kind of modeled is, you know, maybe the wire there or something. But being able to model something, UV map it, bring it into Substance, texture it, bring it into Unreal, and actually like move around the item. Okay. So, oops. So this item was gaming pipeline. So this was the stuff we were doing today. So our objectives were create simple 3D model, baseball bat, we did that. Lay out the UVs, did it. Use Substance Painter, did it. Import into Unreal and build material, did it. Sweet. So when you turn this one in, you're going to turn in that whole folder. So you have a 2520 folder that's called gaming. That whole folder, even though it's 2 gigs, it's huge, you're going to put onto the Z drive. Nope, that's the wrong one. In the 2520, inside the gaming pipeline turn in. Now, if you don't get time to do the actual full bat with the wire and everything, that's fine. As long as you have a regular bat inside of Unreal, I will accept that for the first assignment. Okay? Questions? Still there. Okay, yep.